Moto Guru.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a route from a track using the Mac version of Garmin BaseCamp, and then how to navigate that route on a Garmin device. So firstly, what is a track? A track is simply a series of GPS points in order. In Garmin BaseCamp, tracks appear with this footstep logo next to them. Secondly, where do tracks come from? Well, they come from several sources. The first one to consider is your Garmin device. When your Garmin device is switched on and has a GPS signal, it's tracking you all the time, and that's regardless of whether you're navigating a route or not. Secondly, tracks can be found on the internet on sites such as bestbikingroads.com, where users share motorcycle routes or other routes such as hiking routes. They're typically shared as tracks because tracks are device neutral. They're not specific to Garmin, TomTom, or another brand of device. So what is the difference between a track and a route? Well, to put it simply, a track is not navigable. It's simply that series of GPS points I described earlier, whereas a route is a series of via points that the device can interpret and then navigate. So in order to navigate a track on the Garmin device, we need to first convert it to a route, which is what we're going to do today. Before we start any exercise where we're going to be creating routes in BaseCamp that we wish to navigate on our Garmin device, the first thing we should do is check that the settings for our activity profiles in BaseCamp are aligned to the usage mode on our Garmin device so that our routes navigate accurately. In order to do this, I need to click on the activity drop-down and choose Manage Activities. I'm going to select motorcycling because that's the focus for today and click on Settings. So these are the routing preference settings in BaseCamp for the motorcycling activity profile. So ideally, I want these to match the usage mode on the device as close as possible. So I'll choose the calculation mode fastest time. That's ideally the best calculation mode for route plotting also, because we don't want the device or the software to interpret what we're doing using an algorithm like curvy roads. We wanted to simply follow it, so fastest time is best. Then the road type avoidances, I want these to match those on the device as closely as possible, although some of the terminology is slightly different. And the feature type avoidances, again, I want these to match those that I have on the device as closely as possible. So I'm going to uncheck U-turns. So now let's move to the device and align the settings there. And on the device, we need to choose the appropriate usage mode. So in this case, I'll select motorcycle and choose save. And then I go to settings, navigation, and notice there's a motorcycle icon next to the navigation settings to show that these are specific to the motorcycle mode. And then I'll choose calculation mode and make sure this is aligned to the calculation mode in BaseCamp, in this case, faster time. And then I need to select avoidances and make sure the avoidances here are aligned to those in BaseCamp as well. The terminology is slightly different between the device and BaseCamp, but we just need to get these to match as close as possible so that our routes navigate accurately. So once that's done, we can click save and then we're ready to continue. For the first example, let's look at creating a route from a track downloaded from the website bestbikingroads.com. So I've launched BaseCamp and I've connected my Garmin device to the computer, the Garmin Zemo XT, which appears here under my Garmin devices, and I've created a couple of example lists for today. So firstly, let's import the track from Best Biking Roads. I've downloaded it already, so I'm going to click on example list 1 and choose File, Import into example list 1. And there is the track at the top. So I'm going to select that and choose Import. So I'm going to rename it to Best Biking Roads Track. So I right click and choose Rename. Next, I'm going to right click and choose Show on Map so I can see where it goes. So it starts here and goes south towards the south coast, and that looks like an interesting route. So to create a route from this track, I'm going to first select the activity profile I want to use when creating the route. So I'm going to choose motorcycling. Then I'm going to double click on the track and click on the sprocket on the bottom left and choose Create Route. So that's now creating a route from the track. This can take some time depending on the number of points the track has. Okay, and now we have our route. So if we look at our route, interestingly, you'll see it only has two via points, the start point and the end point. There are no other via points on the route. So you may wonder how this route is keeping its shape. Now, it's keeping its shape due to what are called Garmin route point extensions, which are additional pieces of GPS data that make up the route but don't appear as via points. If you want to view the Garmin route point extensions, you can export the route and open it in a text editor like this. So I'm going to rename this. Right click and rename and call it Best Biking Roads Route. And then I would go to File, Export Selected User Data. Then once I've saved that, I'd open it in a text editor. Now I've prepared that already just to save a bit of time. So this is the route opened in a text editor. And as you scroll down, you can come to this section here called Route Point Extension. And this has all of the GPS points that make up the remainder of the route. So you may be asking yourself, why is this important? Well, it's important because if anything happens when you're out on the route that causes the route to recalculate, so for example, if you deviated from the route, or perhaps one of the points or one of the roads wasn't mapped that accurately, and that caused the device to recalculate, it will recalculate the route based on the via points only, in this case the start point and the end point. When the route recalculates on the device, all of the Garmin route point extensions data is discarded, and that's one of the biggest problems people have when creating a route from a track. It looks great, they go out and ride it, and then something happens that causes the device to recalculate and the route completely disappears. Now, if you want to prevent this from happening, you can change the settings on your device to prevent it from recalculating automatically. To do this on a Garmin Zumo XT, first select the usage mode that we want to use for the route, in this case motorcycle, and click Save. And next click on Settings and Navigation, and notice there's a motorcycle icon next to Navigation. So these settings are specifically for the motorcycle usage mode. Next click Off Route Recalculation and change this setting from automatic to either off or prompted, and click Save. If the setting is set to off and you deviate from the route, it simply won't recalculate. If you set it to prompted, it will prompt you to recalculate, and that's a good setting to choose because at least then you'll be made aware that you've deviated from the route, in which case you can choose no, you don't wish the route to recalculate, and then make your own way back onto the route. So when you've chosen either off or prompted, click on Save, and then the route won't recalculate and lose its shape should you deviate from it. This is useful because it means your route won't suddenly disappear, but there are some disadvantages, the main one being should you deviate from the route, the device will not help you to navigate back onto the route. So a more robust way of creating routes from tracks is to add additional via points, and that way if you do deviate from the route, it will recalculate based on those via points, and should you deviate from the route, it will help you navigate back onto the route and onto the next via point in the series. So I'll show you how to do that next. So to do that, what we need to do is firstly change the activity profile to direct, which is here. And then we need to change a setting in BaseCamp which determines the number of via points that will be created from the track when it's converted to a route. To change that setting, we need to click on BaseCamp, Preferences, and then click on Advanced, and it's this value here, track conversion, via points created when converting a track to a route. So you'll need to experiment with this a little bit to find the ideal number of via points for the route you're creating, but 20 is normally a sensible number. So for this example, let's put 20 and close that. And now we're going to double click on our track again. And again, we're going to click on the sprocket and choose Create Route. And notice that the route created almost instantly this time. And now if we look at it in a bit more detail, we've got a route with 20 via points. Now, of course, the current activity profile we're using is direct, which isn't very useful unless we have a helicopter. And if we zoom in a bit, we'll see it's not following the roads, but we can fix that by changing the activity profile from direct to motorcycling. And you'll notice the route recalculates, and now it's following the roads. So let's make a few changes to this to check it matches the track correctly. So I'll rename the route, and I'll call it Best Biking Roads Route with Via Points. And I'll also change the color of it. So I'll go to information and change it from magenta to red. And what I'll do as well is I'll change the color of the track here. So I'll double click on that and change that to green. So this will make it easier for us to see the differences. So if I select the route with via points again and zoom in slightly, you can see in this case here, it's deviating from the track. If I select both of them at the same time by using shift and click, we can clearly see the differences there. So I'm going to go and fix the route so it matches the track. So for that, I'm going to insert a few additional via points. So I'm going to select the hand tool and hover over the route here. You see the hand turns into a pointer and drag that onto the green track there. So that's fixed that piece there. And let's pan around and see if there's a few other changes. So here's another one. You can see it's not matching the track. So if I go and click and drag that and make that match again, let's pan around a bit more and see if there are any other changes. So there's another one. And we see the track is going down this road, whereas the route is over here. So we try and get the correct piece. So you see this piece here is going south. We can see the little bit of arrow there. So if I drag that over onto here, that should fix that piece. Great. And the rest looks good. We zoom out a bit and have a look. Now this piece here seems a bit strange. So we're going around this additional loop here, which is perhaps a little unnecessary. So let's see if we can remove that from this section. So this dot here is the via point on the route. So we'll see if we can maybe move that. So let's move that perhaps over to here. And we see we've got a small change, but it's removed the loop. So let's add one more via point over to here. And see, and that's almost perfect. You see, it's not following this particular road down here, B244, but I've worked with this route a little bit before, and I think it's some sort of a glitch or an idiosyncrasy. I can't get the route to go down that road in any elegant way. I'll show you if I add a via point there. It's going to go halfway down and come back and so on. So what I'll do, I'll just undo that, and I'll be satisfied that I can't match that particular section exactly, but I think it's only a mile, so it will be okay. So the rest of that looks good. Let me zoom out and see where we're going. That all looks good. So next, a bit of housekeeping. Before we send the route to the device, we need to check that all of our via points are in good positions. So if I double click on the route and I make sure this box here, center on selected, is checked, when I click on each via point, it'll zoom right in and show it to me clearly. When positioning via points, we should always position them in clear stretches of road. Never position a via point on a junction or a roundabout, because that's where you can run into issues and where the route might deviate unnecessarily, or you may be sent to do a lap of a roundabout unnecessarily. So we're going to fix up all of those potential issues now. So that is the first via point. That looks good in a clear section of road. So I'm going to click on the second one. That looks okay. It's a bit off to the left, so I can move that back into position using the hand tool as a pointer. Go to the next via point. That looks okay, but it's sort of in the center of town, so I'll move that into a clear section of road. And the next via point, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. That is on a junction, so that's no good. So let's move it away from the junction. And you see if we zoom in, it's actually, I think, maybe close to a roundabout, but let's move that up into a clear section of road and fix that one up nicely. And then the next via point, that one in the center of town next to a roundabout. So we could move that perhaps a bit further back. So let's move it to there. There we go, much better. And let's move on. The next via point, that's okay, a clear section of road. This one, let's move it a bit further up here. Looking at this route, actually, I know some of these roads. I've been down them before and they look really good. Well, from what I remember, they were really good. So let's move that as well. And the remaining ones, that is no good because it's on a junction. So let's move it up. This is taking a while, but it will be absolutely worth it when you come to ride the route. Let's see. That one, I'll move it away from the junction. When you create routes from tracks, what you'll always tend to find is that when you use this method to insert via points, for some reason they always seem to end up, or many of them seem to end up on junctions. It's purely down to chance, but it just seems to be the way it works out. So that, move that slightly as well. That looks good. This final one, ooh, that is not good. That is on a junction as well. So let's move it a bit further out of the way. There we go. Okay. So before we send the route to the device, there's a few more to do. I thought I was done. Let's see. There we go. 16 is good. 17. Again, that's on a junction. We don't want that to be there. Let's move that. 18, move that over to here. 19 is good. And 20 is okay too. So looking through the list of via points, you'll notice some of them have this piece next to them, won't alert, and some of them don't. So these are different types of via points, alerting via points and non-alerting via points. Alerting via points will announce when you approach them, so they'll say, arriving at such and such as you ride along. And if you miss an alerting via point for whichever reason, maybe it wasn't positioned correctly, the device will recalculate and send you back to collect it. Non-alerting via points, like these ones that say won't alert, don't announce. So you see a little kind of grey disc on the route, but it doesn't say you're approaching it or whether you've passed it. And indeed, if one of these is slightly mispositioned and you miss it, but you stay on the route, it's simply discarded and the device doesn't send you back to get it. So what I would recommend you do is set all of your intermediate via points, so the via points between the start point and the end point, to non-alerting. So to do that, select the second one in the list, and then select the second last one, hold down Shift and left click, and then simply right click and choose Don't Alert on Arrival. You'll notice in brackets there it says shaping point. I try and avoid using that term shaping point, and I just say alerting and non-alerting because every via point on the route shapes it in some way. So I find that term shaping point a bit misleading. The start point and the end point on the route are compulsory alerting via points. So if you select the start point and right click, you'll see Don't Alert on Arrival is grayed out, and the same for the end point. Don't Alert on Arrival is grayed out. So as I say, select the second via point, hold down Shift, select the second last via point, right click, and change those to Don't Alert on Arrival. So now we're all set. With our route, we can send it to our device and navigate it. To do that, we close the route and then right click on it and choose Send to Device. Then I'm going to choose the device, my Garmin Zemo XT, and I'm going to send the routes and waypoints. So I'll go ahead and click Send and click Close. And I'll also send the route with 2 via points, so I'll rename that first. and call it best biking roads route 2 via points. And again, right click and choose send to device and click send. Now, once the routes are on our device, we can simulate riding them using the device GPS simulator before we go and ride them in the real world. Now on the device, if I power it up and click agree, it will prompt me that new routes have been found and ask me if I want to import those into Trip Planner. So I'm going to click yes, and I'm going to import the best biking roads route 2 via points and then the best biking roads route with many via points as well, and click import. Next, I'll enable GPS simulator so that we can simulate riding the routes. To do that, I click on settings, navigation, and select GPS simulator and click OK. So firstly, let's ride the best biking roads route with 2 via points. So to do that, I select apps, trip planner, save trips, and we're going to choose this one, best biking roads route with 2 via points. So I select that, and you'll notice here we only have 2 via points, and if I click on the map, it has still held its shape, but you see there are no intermediate via points, either alerting or non-alerting. So I'm going to click on go, and I'm going to choose the destination as the next point, or the final via point, because when you're running simulations on the device, if you choose the end point, it'll start you at the start point and navigate you around the route. If you choose the start point, it'll navigate you from your last known location, normally your house, to the start of the route, which isn't ideal because we want to see how to ride around the route. So choose the final via point and click on OK. There we go. See, we've still got the correct shape, and click start. Simulate driving this route. Yes.
In 2 miles, keep right of the pinnock.
So far so good. We've got our route summary on the right there. And if I click on the central map and click this view here, start to finish, we can see a view of the overall route, and it's kept its shape. So next I'm going to force the route to recalculate to simulate what would happen if we deviated from it and we hadn't set our off-route recalculation setting to be off or prompted. So to do this, I'm going to click on the context menu down here on the right, and I'm going to click on edit route. And I'm going to choose detour by distance, and I'm going to say avoid the next half mile. Now watch what happens.
Half a mile, turn left onto Swan Lane.
So the route is recalculated. You notice the summary has changed completely. The distance is now 12 miles. And if we look at the overall route, it's completely vanished. And now we simply have a direct route from the start via point to the end point using the route calculation mode that's configured in the device. So you see there the entire route has been lost.
In 1 mile, turn left onto Calhill Park.
Next, let's simulate driving the route with many via points and observe what happens when that route recalculates. So I'm going to click on stop to stop that initial simulation, and let's kick off the second simulation. So let's go to apps, trip planner, save trips, best biking roads route with via points. And you'll see here we have all of those via points in our list. And if I click on map, we'll see all across our route, we've got our non-alerting via points, which are these sort of blue circles. So if I click on go and choose again the final destination as my next destination to simulate going around the route, and click on OK. Again, we see the route shape there, and click start. And yes, simulate driving the route.
In 2 miles, keep right of the pinnock.
So if we look at the overall route, there it is, and there's its shape. So let's once again force the route to recalculate by doing what I showed you earlier. So I'm going to click on the context menu here, and I'm going to click on edit route, And let's choose detour by distance again, avoid the next half mile. So the route recalculates.
In 3/4 of a mile, turn right onto Calhill Park.
And now if we look at the overall route, so let's click on the map here. And choose start to finish.
Turn right onto Calhill Park.
You'll notice it still kept its entire shape. It's going to detour slightly to avoid the next half mile of road, but it's recalculated based on all of the remaining via points, so it's kept its shape. And that's the advantage of adding additional via points when you create a route from a track. The route is more robust, perhaps more reliable, and should you deviate from it, the device will guide you back onto it. For the next example, I'll show you how to create a route from a track that's been recorded on your Garmin device. So to do that, we need to select our Garmin device on the left here under My Garmin Devices, and you'll see at the bottom the contents of the device are displayed in this window. So the route I want to use for this example was a route I rode on the 28th of June, and I set off at 23 minutes past 7 in the morning. So I'll find that in the list here. There it is. So I'm going to right click on that route, on that track, and click copy. And I'm going to paste it into this example list 2 into here. Click on paste. And now if I right click on that and click show on the map, you can see the route I rode. So I rode out of London and rode around this section here around Aylesbury, and then rode back to London in the afternoon. So if that route is perfect and you want to ride it using the technique I showed you before, where we simply create a route from a track, I will double click on it and choose the sprocket. Well, in fact, let's choose the activity profile we want to use first, motorcycling, and then I will click on the sprocket and choose create route. Now watch carefully what happens next. BaseCamp has crashed. When you create routes from more complex tracks, this happens quite a lot with the Mac version of BaseCamp, whether it's a track from your device or one using the technique I've shown in a previous video about creating routes from Google Maps and importing them into BaseCamp. So I've tried this twice. Both on my Mac Mini, and I also have a Mac laptop, and in both cases the outcome was the same. It crashed. So what we'll do, we'll reopen BaseCamp and look at how we can work around that. If BaseCamp hadn't crashed and had managed to create the route, it would have looked like this. So this is the same route which I created on the PC version of BaseCamp, just to show you what it would look like. So there it is. And if I double click on it, you can see, as in the previous example, we've only got 2 via points, a start point and an end point. So if we want to ride this route as it is, similar to the previous example, we can simply right click on it and choose send to device and send it to our Garmin Zumo XT. But just be mindful that if we do anything that causes the device to recalculate, the route will be discarded and it will simply create a route from the start point to the end point. So if we're going to ride it in this manner, we must set the device settings so that the route doesn't recalculate. But there's a few other things to consider here as well. So if we want to edit this route in its current state, that's very difficult to do because we don't have any via points or things to change. And indeed, if you want to remove the initial section here, which is riding from my house to the start point, it's very difficult to do that with the route in its current state too. And indeed, if you wanted to share it online, you probably wouldn't want to give people directions to turn up at your house, or perhaps they might want to come around for a cup of tea. So similar to the previous example, let's recreate this route and use via points this time. So in this instance, we'll set the activity profile to direct as before, and I will double click on the track, and I will click on the sprocket and choose create route. And notice this time BaseCamp doesn't crash, it simply creates the route and we're good to go. So from here, it's the same drill as before. We change the activity profile to the one we want to do, which in this case is motorcycling, and the route will recalculate. And from now we can delete the bits that we don't want to have as part of the route. So if I select the first via point now and hold down Shift and use the up arrow, it'll slowly start to remove sections of the route. So let's remove that first section here, or sorry, start to select sections of the route. So if I delete those first two via points by clicking delete, and then maybe towards the end, click on the final one, hold Shift and press the up key, we can remove some sections from there. So maybe those first three, again, if I press delete, or I can right click on these and click remove. And now I'm going to click on this arrow to recalculate the route. So it's going to recalculate based on the via points that are remaining. Similar to before, let's change the color of the route to red. And let's change the color of the track to green. And let's select them both. So Shift select. And now let's fix the route where it doesn't match the track. So again, choose the hand tool here. It's gone away from the track, so I'm going to left click and drag that onto there. And again, down at the bottom here, just to make sure it matches correctly. And one more, it really doesn't like this section down here at the bottom. There we go, looking good. And let's go and change few of the other sections. That bit's probably okay. That may have even been a mistake that we made, so that's fine. A few other changes here, so let's drag this section onto the route. There we go, and we've got another section here to fix. That's good to go. So that's all fine. A few minor changes to make here, so let's change that to there. And here again, the objective is to get it to match the track. A small deviation there, I think that will be okay. And that is the beginning, and that piece down there is the end. So as before, do the same housekeeping before we send it to the device. So double click on the route, click center on selected, and check all of your via points are in good locations. If they're not in good locations, like this one here, move them to a good location. And then finally, as before, I would suggest you select the second via point, the second to last via point, right click and choose don't alert on arrival, so to make them all non-alerting via points. Then rename the route, so let's call it ride out route from track. And then finally, right click on the route and choose send to device. Click send, and then you're ready to check the route on the device using GPS simulator and then ride it in the real world. So that is how to create a route from a track, test it on the device using GPS simulator, and then navigate it in the real world. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, share, and subscribe.